Hello and welcome back to episode 2 of my Avatar The Last Airbender Rewatch Series. Hello and welcome back. I'm Jared Woodcox, author of the young adult fantasy series Shadowcasters. As many of you might know, Avatar is one of the biggest inspirations for this series that I've written, and so I really wanted to dive into every episode of Avatar The Last Airbender, give my thoughts, my impressions, talk about some of the ways that show relates to the series that I'm writing. So let's dive in. Today we're talking about episode 2, The Avatar Returns. I really like this episode, and I feel like this is one that really stuck with me. It's one that I must have seen a lot as a kid because I remember this one extremely well. Obviously, it's the first time that Aang goes into the Avatar state that we get to see, and so that's really powerful. We get really good character development for Sokka and Katara and for Zuko. There's a lot of things to really love about this episode. I want to break down a few of my thoughts. I like at the beginning how we see more of sort of this conflict between Sokka and Katara. Like, obviously, this is a theme throughout the series. Those two love each other, but they are far from seeing eye to eye all the time. We also get Sokka, who, wants to kick Aang out of the village. He thinks that he signaled the Fire Nation, and, he has it from his mindset that he's doing it to protect the village. He even says, like, hey, I'm keeping my promise to Dad. And I think that is just such a huge thing that we have, Katara, who's more of this mother figure. Then we have Sokka, who feels like he has to be the protector of the village, and he has this duty to keep his promise to his dad to protect the village. And I love that world building, that character development right there. Of course, in this scene too, there's the really, honestly, it's a pretty deep part where Katara basically says, Aang has brought something to our village we haven't had in a long time, and that is fun. And, Sokka's response is, you can't fight the Fire Nation with fun. Then lovable Aang says, you should try it sometime. And like that little interaction just goes a long way in showing a lot about those three characters. Because it's funny to hear Sokka, be like, hey, you can't fight it with fun. Because we know that Sokka is actually a really fun, lighthearted character. But I think in these early episodes, we really see that like he has chosen or he's felt forced to kind of lock his fun side, his childlike side deep down. And it's not until he spends more time around Aang that that's going to come out more. More on this in a second. But I just love this idea that like Sokka, he's had to be so like serious and a protector, and it's going to be Aang that helps bring out that childlike side of him. Something I love a lot about like this episode, but the series as a whole, is we just have really clear objectives and really clear stakes. In this one, we establish, hey, their next step is they need to go to the North Pole. Both Aang and Katara need to learn waterbending. Obviously, they're going to do so together is the plan here. And just this whole premise of like in the show of Avatar, we know he needs to master all 4 elements and needs to use those abilities to defeat the Fire Lord. It's just a really purpose-built and purpose-driven show when it has really high stakes. Obviously, as the series progresses, we're going to learn even more about why there's like a timing to those stakes that's important. And so just really well done. And I love that like right away we know, hey, their next step, they're going to the North Pole. It's really cool to be able to follow along with their journey. When Aang is leaving, we get kind of a fun moment with him where he says, I haven't cleaned my room in 100 years. And, kind of corny, but still so funny to see this really childish Aang who, like, even amidst everything that's going on, he still has these thoughts of like, I got to clean my room. And like, I just love the child that he embodies. Even though he's this avatar, he's their last hope, he's still just a kid, and he embraces that. I also really love the part where Sokka is getting ready for war and he like puts the war paint on. And if you saw my short recap, one of my favorite things about this episode is like we really see that Sokka is extremely brave. And like even though he's often like the punchline or he has obviously lots of flaws, like no one can deny his bravery. And it's cool that like he like single-handedly stands up to that Fire Nation worship coming in, and like he doesn't budge when it comes, and he rushes Zuko twice. And yeah, he gets the hit with the boomerang, which is pretty funny, but obviously overall he's no match for Zuko. And this says a lot about Sokka as well, that sometimes his confidence is a little bit irrational. But yeah, like all his flaws aside, he is extremely brave and he wants to be a good protector. He wants to be a good warrior. This is something I really love about Sokka, and I think it can't be understated. Something subtle in a lot of these episodes too is there's really cool juxtaposition. Sometimes it's Sokka and Katara or Aang and the others. And this one I actually liked the juxtaposition between Sokka and Zuko, and we see the two kind of preparing for battle. And obviously for both of them, it's like something they're very serious about. You have Zuko getting his armor on, you have Sokka getting the war paint on. And what's really unique I thought about this time is like both of these characters are so driven by wanting to please their fathers. Obviously, we know Zuko basically can't return home until he gets his honor back. We're going to explore this a lot more later in the series. And then Sokka, like his dad went off to war and he wants to be able to fill in his dad's shoes while his dad is gone. So obviously Ozai is a horrible father, and we'll learn more about that later on. And I would say Sokka's father is a good father. But like there's just this cool juxtaposition of like both want to please their fathers, even though both of them are raised and view their fathers in a very, very different light. And we see this right away just in the second episode. Even if it's your first time through, you probably don't really think about their dads that much yet. Obviously, haven't really met them. But like for someone that's rewatching it, it's cool to see this comparison between Zuko and Sokka right from the start here. This is little, but like I thought it was cool to have the penguin sledding pay off. That Aang returns on the penguin that he's sledding on to come back that way. Kind of a cool way to like, oh, that happened in the first one, but it has a bigger purpose in episode 2. Love that. There are a few moments in this episode that like, there's a few things like a little bit immature. And like, again, I get this is like originally and probably still is a show for kids. But it kind of reminded me of like, this is off topic a little bit, but the show Clone Wars, Star Wars Clone Wars, one of my favorite shows ever. And I feel like that one started out pretty childish too. And then I don't know if they just like realized like it was reaching a more mature audience or what, but like obviously that one gets so intense and like so much more mature later on. I feel like Avatar kind of does something similar, maybe not to that same extent, but you have a lot more of like the childish humor in these early episodes. But definitely the show matures big time as it goes later on. So that was something that jumped out to me. Another thing that really jumped out, and this probably didn't mean much to anybody that's watching for their first time, but once you get to know Zuko better, I thought it was really, really powerful. The fact that he's got Aang's turned himself in, and Zuko just says, "I'm going home." And like those 3 words, like once you understand, like, wow, everything that he's been through, everything he's been up against, and to think he was honestly like really close, and at least in his mind, to like completing his mission right here, I can only imagine how much that haunted him moving forward. Gotta admit, I didn't remember how much like Katara like yells and gets upset with Sokka. Like I knew she did, but like seeing in these first 2 episodes, I'm like, oh man, yeah, she's a little more of a fireball than I remember. But I like that too because Katara is actually one of the inspirations for the character Sumi in my Shadowcaster series. She's actually the one on this cover right here. This is Sumi. I always think of her as kind of a mix between Katara from Avatar and Tifa from Final Fantasy VII. And likewise, Sumi has kind of like a fiery, feisty personality, but she's also like super kind and like super willing to help and forgive. So I feel like Katara is like a very similar encapsulation of that. And this episode reminded me of that trait. Some great lines here from Sokka. Like I just love his like dry sarcasm. He's like, "You just love taking me out of my comfort zone." Or when he's trying to get Appa to fly and he's all sarcastic, like up, elevate, ascend. Like it's so funny. But there's actually something really meaningful that happens here. When he finally does get Appa to fly, and for the first time we really see Sokka kind of lose his mind a little bit, like in a good way, and he's just like, what, he's flying, and like all of a sudden he has that childlike wonder back. And then as soon as he notices Katara kind of staring at him, he kind of like tries to play it off like, oh, no big deal, like whatever. But this has so much about his character, and I love it because like Sokka, he has also been forced to stifle a lot of like his childhood and his childish nature because he's been forced to be a protector of the Southern Water Tribe. But in this instance, I know Aang's not there right now, it's with Appa, but like I think Aang is one that comes in and really helps Sokka rediscover a lot of that joy, a lot of that humor, a lot of that like childlike joy. And so it's cool to see like his exterior wall be broken here when he realizes, wow, Appa is actually flying. This is amazing. This is another cool juxtaposition because while Sokka has been conditioned to like abandon childlike nature and like leave it behind, Aang is the embodiment of it. And so there's kind of this like opposite nature between the two. But again, it's also cool how Aang helps bring it out of Sokka later on. Couple more things. Obviously, the last battle sequence is really cool. I just love Aang like escaping through the Fire Nation ship, and we see a lot of his airbending. I do think Zuko probably should have been a little bit better prepared. I mean, he had him captured, and I get that he hasn't seen an airbender, but maybe in all of his time like preparing and studying, he could have found that airbenders could bend, with their breath as well. So that was kind of a big miss and a big mistake on his part. But super cool sequence, and obviously when we get to see Aang in the Avatar state for the first time, we see him waterbend. It's really cool. And then it's so interesting. I mentioned this in that first episode, but like we see Katara try to waterbend, and it's just astounding. Like she's really not good, right? She's still super novice at this point. So again, one of my favorite aspects of this show too is how the character's skills really grow. And we're going to see that a ton with Katara, and just this reminder of like, yeah, she's not a very good waterbender right now, but it's awesome to see how that increases in the episodes to come. A couple other things I loved about the ending are when they're asking Aang about like how he did it, how he did the Avatar state. And he's like, I don't know, I just kind of did it. Like, I love that it's like a power that he doesn't even really know how to use or understand. There's a character in Shadowcasters book 3 who's going to be introduced, and he has some powers too that he can't really understand. And I think that Aang is kind of a good like personality comparison to him, so I'm excited for y'all to meet that character. But yeah, I love this idea of like Aang is kind of in some ways, he's this reluctant hero. Like he says he didn't want to be the Avatar. He doesn't really know how to use his powers yet, and it makes him so intriguing, especially knowing that he just wants to embrace childhood the way he does. Also love kind of the payback of when Sokka is able to poke Zuko in the face and knock him off the edge of the boat after Zuko had kicked his butt back at the South Pole earlier. So it was really cool to see that come full circle. Again, I just love how like brave Sokka is. He has that really funny line where it's like, I'm just a guy with a boomerang. I didn't ask for all this magic and flying. And like, just this is, to me, this is like one of my favorite Sokka episodes. And he's great. And we learned so much about him in this episode. It's a lot of fun. And then, of course, we end with Iroh and Zuko, where Iroh is saying, like, hey, at least we know the biggest threat to the Fire Nation is just a little kid. But, of course, Zuko's like, I will never underestimate him again. And that's one of my biggest takeaways from this episode is, like, Zuko, like, yeah, you had him. Like, you had him captured, so to speak. And, I mean, episode 2, we know he's not going to get him, right? We all kind of knew that Aang was going to get away. But still, like, if you put yourself in Zuko's shoes, it's sort of like he had this really great opportunity and he squandered it. And especially knowing, like, how hard he'd been searching and how much it would have meant to him to capture the Avatar, especially in this part of the show, this early before some of his self-discovery is going to take place. It's like, wow, yeah, he really blew a big chance here. And that early underestimation of Aang is going to be, again, another recurring theme throughout the series. I do wonder, and like not to spoil anything too much for those that are watching for the first time, but do you think Iroh was really trying to hit Appa at the end there when they were working together to shoot that fireball? I don't know. That's a question I had was, knowing what we know about Iroh and his knowledge of, world balance and things like that, how hard was he really trying there at the end to hit Appa out of the sky? Okay, ending with the ranking, I'm going to give this one a solid A. I'm actually going to slot this one a little bit ahead of episode 1. This one's close to an S tier one for me because I just really love we see Aang in the Avatar state. It's really memorable. The escape scene from the Fire Nation ship is really, really cool. Ultimately, there's a few things where like kind of some immature like eye roll moments in this one that still kind of prevent it from being an S tier to me. And then also like I know what's coming. I know there's going to be some even cooler, more emotional, more powerful, more gripping ones that I think will get it into the S tier range. But this one's really, really good. I don't have a ton of complaints or flaws with it, other than I feel like Zuko, should have been a little better prepared, knowing that Aang could airbend with his breath. But other than that, like this one's really solid. I don't have many qualms with it. Really memorable, really exciting that we know the next steps and we know the stakes coming up. So definitely giving this one an A. Well, those are some of my thoughts. I'd love to hear your input and feedback as well. I'll see you next time for episode 3, The Southern Air Temple.